You're listening to Crossroads Church with Pastors Marcus and Natalie Avalos. The following message was recorded live at our Sunday morning services. For more information, go to www.crossroadsc.com or visit us in one of our Sunday morning services at 8:30, 10, and 11:30. And now prepare your hearts as we receive this morning's message.
Here's the thing I know about you. There's some areas in your life right now where you look around and you're not quite where you want to be. Maybe it's in your finances. You're looking at it and you're saying, man, we're in debt. But you look at other people and you're like, how do they do that? How do they live that way? Like, you know they're out of debt. You know they're living within their means. But you're like, how do they do that, right? Or maybe you've been working really hard, and you're seeing somebody that's started their own business, and you just think, man, that would be really cool to do that. But something in the back of your head is saying this: I don't know that I'd ever be able to do that. We all have that. There's a voice inside of our heads that says, I don't know if I could do that. And here's where it comes from. It comes from things people have told you or the experiences you've had in life. And here's the danger of this. A lot of times in life, we run through life with a limited perspective because we were never exposed to anything else than a very narrow, limited perspective. So we get stuck in boxes that we put ourselves in because of stuff we believed about ourselves, or we get stuck in boxes that other people have put us in because people say, hey, our family doesn't do that. Maybe you're from a family that you're like, maybe wanting to go to college. And our family doesn't do that. We go out and work. We make a living. We take care of the world, and we don't go to college. And you say, but I kind of feel like maybe I want to go to college, right? Or maybe you're from a family that says, we don't not go to college. And you're like, man, I don't really feel like going to college right now. And you say, right? So that's a box maybe somebody's put you in because they say, we don't do that. That's not what we do. We can't do that, right? Or maybe you're looking around and you're seeing people who, their fitness level, you just think, man, how do they stay so thin and healthy? And I'm big boned, right? I can't do that. And the voice inside of you saying, you'd never be able to do that. You just don't have you don't have the discipline to pull that off. You don't have the body type to do that. Or maybe financially you're saying, I just want to get out of debt. And you're trying, and it's in your mind, you're thinking, I can't do it. I'm going to be in debt for the rest of my life. And we get in these boxes, and we get these mental blocks that things people have told us and stuff we believed about ourselves that limits us from where God wants to take us. And they're lies. They're mental blocks that are lies about who you are and what you believe about the world. And here's the thing about it. You don't know what you don't know about life. Think about that. You don't know what you don't know. And the reason you don't is because people who don't know have been telling you things that they don't know, and so you don't know because they don't know. You getting that? There's all sorts of worlds and ways of living out there. You ever had one of these situations where you come across something, you're like, how come nobody's told me about this before? This is so cool. You just didn't know, but all these other people have been benefiting from it, but you haven't been, and all of a sudden it happens, and you're like, how come nobody ever told me about this thing or this product or whatever? That's the way it is in life a lot of times. There's just stuff you don't know, but here's the thing. It doesn't mean you have to keep on not knowing. And God wants to take you to a place that's going to require you to develop a whole new way of looking at life. And when we get to this place where we all of a sudden say, I want to do this, but I don't think it's possible. I don't know that there's any way somebody like me could do that. Then you've come to a place where you need to develop some new roadmaps. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning, is how to develop a new roadmap for the place that God wants to take you in life, because it's going to require some changes that might be a little uncomfortable. But we're going to look at the story of Peter. So last week we talked about how Peter, his life had completely changed, right? Jesus called Peter, said, follow me. Peter hangs out with Jesus for 3 years. Everything changes in Peter's life. And then all of a sudden, Jesus dies, is resurrected, and then goes to the Father. And everything's changed for Peter. All of a sudden, he realizes, my life is not going to be the same anymore. But he's got this whole new revelation. And then Jesus shows up to him and says, hey, Peter, I know you screwed up, but look, we're good. We're good right now. But listen to me. I know everything's changed, but really nothing has changed because the call I've put on your life has not changed. And so what we learned from that is, no matter what changes come to your life, whether you thought you'd be married to this person by now, whether you thought you'd still be married to this person, whether you thought your kids would turn out differently than they did, whether you thought you'd be at a different place in life, the call on your life has not changed just because the circumstances around you have changed. And you need to stay true to the calling God has placed in you, because there's something God's put in you, and you need to stay true to that even if everything around you has changed. So Peter learned that, yeah, he messed up, But Jesus said, if you'll follow me, you're still on track. So Peter gets back on, and we're going to look at a story that happened about 10 to 15 years later. We don't know exactly how long later, where Peter, he's started to become this fisher of men, right? So he's evangelizing, but he's working within the context that he knows. And Peter grew up as a little Jewish boy. And as Jews, there were very strict rules that were laid out for what Jews could do and couldn't do, what they could eat, what they couldn't eat, who they could talk to and who they couldn't talk to. And things that they could do were called clean. Things that they couldn't do were called unclean. Things they could eat were called clean. Things they couldn't eat were called unclean. People they could hang out with, other Jews, were called clean. And the non-Jews were called unclean. The word is Gentiles. We're actually Gentiles. If you don't have a Jewish in you, you're a Gentile. And he said, this is where he grew up. He grew up with this background of this is what we do as Jews. And he started doing what he knew in that context. And he started evangelizing, telling Jews about Jesus. But Jesus was about to change things because Jesus came for the whole world. And he said, guys, I need the whole world to get this message. And for us to do that, you're going to have to do some things that are a little uncomfortable. You're going to have to go by a new roadmap. So we're going to pick up the story of Peter in this moment where everything changed. And Peter had to operate by some completely new roadmaps. And we're going to look at 3 things that I think we can extract from that story that apply to us when God calls us to step into some new places. So this is where we pick up the story of Peter. Peter's in a town called Jaffa. If you go to modern-day Israel, the capital of Israel is Tel Aviv Yaffo is what it's called. You've heard it called Tel Aviv. The full name is Tel Aviv Yaffo. It's because it's a combination of 2 cities, Tel Aviv and Yaffo, which is Joppa. So this is where this happened. This happened in modern-day Tel Aviv, what would be modern-day Tel Aviv. It's also, remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about Jonah who fled from what God was calling him to do. That's where Jonah took off from. Joppa is a very, very important port for centuries. It's been that way. Peter's walking into Joppa and says about noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. So he gets to Joppa. He goes up on the roof to pray. But he got really hungry and he wanted something to eat. And while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. We've all been in that trance, right? You're starving. You're sitting on the couch waiting for the food to be ready. And you're like... So he falls into the trance. And he saw... This is where it gets really weird, okay? This is really weird. So stick with me here. I'm going to explain it in a second. He saw heaven open and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its 4 corners. So there's this sheet that just descends in his dream. He's like, what is going on? And it contained all kinds of 4-footed animals as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, get up, Peter, kill and eat. What a weird dream, right? Now here's the thing. We don't know what kind of animals were in that dream. But we can be certain they were animals that the Jewish religion considered unclean because here's how Peter responds. He says, No, Lord, we don't do that. Surely not, Lord. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean. He said, man, you know this. You made the rules. We don't do this stuff. Like, Jews don't eat this stuff. But God says something to him. He says, the voice spoke to him a second time and says, hey, don't call anything impure that God has made clean. This happened 3 times. You ever notice how Peter needed things in 3s? He denied the Lord 3 times, and the Lord had to ask him 3 times. Hey, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? It's like Peter needed it. Like, it's kind of like me. I'm kind of hard-headed. Like, okay, I get it now. I get it 3 times. So he says, immediately the sheet was taken back to heaven. So then Peter's sitting there freaking out. Like, what in the world? You ever had one of those dreams that, like, kind of the whole day you're just jolted? You jolted awake by the dream. It's so traumatic that the whole day you're thinking about it. And you're like, what does that mean? Now, here's what's happening in the meantime. While Peter's having this dream, just about 30 miles north of there in a town called Caesarea, a guy named Cornelius, who was a commander of the Roman army. Now, keep in mind, the Romans had come in and invaded the Jews. They were the enemy. They were not friends of the Jews. But God came, an angel came to a guy named Cornelius, who was a commander of the Roman army, and said, I need you to go find Peter because Peter's got a message you need to hear, and it's going to change the world. So Cornelius sends some guys to go find Peter. So Peter's down here having this crazy dream. These guys are on the way to get him, and this is what happens. While Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius, the guy that was 30-something miles north, found out where Simon's house was. That's Peter, Simon and Peter. And stopped at the gate. And they called out asking Simon, who was known as Peter, where he was staying. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, Simon, there are 3 men looking for you, so get up and go downstairs, and don't hesitate to go with them, for I've sent them. Now, this is one of those really crazy days for Peter, right? First of all, Peter has this really traumatic dream that's telling him to do something that his whole life he's been told, you don't do that. We don't do that. That's not something we do. Then on top of it, the same Spirit says, by the way, there's 3 guys downstairs. They're from the occupation, and I need you to go with them. And Peter's like, I'm not supposed to hang out with people like that. On top of that, I have this dream. So this is not a good day for Peter, okay? But here's what happens. So Peter goes downstairs, and he said to him, hey, I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come? And the men replied. They said, we come from Cornelius. He's a centurion. Just so you know, he's a commander of an army, and then it's the occupying force. These are the guys you don't normally hang out with. He's a righteous and God-fearing man. So they had to convince Peter, he's a good guy. He likes you Jews, right? And he says, and he's respected by all the Jewish people. An angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say. The day gets weirder. These guys show up and say, an angel told us to come get you so you can come tell us something. At this point, I'm thinking Peter's going, what in the world is going on? This is so bizarre. So here's what happens. They take off. There's no buses. They have to walk there, 30-something miles. They walk up the coast. The whole way, I'm sure he's hanging out with these guys being like, what's the deal? What are we going up here to do? And I don't know. My boss said an angel, and I don't. So he's trying to figure out, what does this dream have to do with what's going on? And he gets there, and this is what's really interesting. By the time he gets there, Peter went inside, and he found a large gathering of people. So this guy, Cornelius, had said, hey, friends, come all together, and let's hang out. You got to hear what this guy Peter's got to say. And Peter, he's totally shocked. And, Peter is not known for being one that kind of controls his tongue. He just says whatever comes to his mind. We've all got that aunt that's like that, right? Well, Peter, he says to them, guys, I'm not supposed to be hanging out with you, right? It's against our law for a Jew to associate with people like you or visit a Gentile. And this is where he kind of jabs them. He says, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. Basically, you guys are really dirty and rotten, but I'm supposed to be here, so here I am, right? So when I was sent for, I came without any objection. So yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here. We don't talk to people like you, but here I am. So he says, what do you want? What am I here for? What am I doing? So here's what happens. They start to tell him what's going on. Cornelius tells him the story. And all of a sudden, I can imagine right in the middle of it, all of a sudden, all the pieces are coming together. He thinks about the dream. He thinks about the conversation he had with the guys while he was walking. And he has this realization. He says, then Peter began to speak. And he says, I now realize how true it is that God doesn't show favoritism, but he accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. And in that moment, Peter began to operate by a whole new roadmap. God began to use him to reach people like us, Gentiles. And it all happened in that one moment because Peter was willing to embrace a whole new way of looking at things, something that went completely against everything he had been taught his whole life. But God called him to do something different. And there's some of you today that God's going to call you to do something completely unfamiliar to anything you've ever known in your life. Your family's never done it. No one in your family has done it. In fact, some of your family have been saying to you, you're crazy for wanting to do that. Who do you think you are? But God is calling you to embrace a new roadmap. And there's 3 things I think we can learn from Peter's story here. And it's interesting because one of the other hats I wear, one of the other things I do during the week is I coach guys who are in their 40s and 50s and they're making large, major life transitions. Their kids are out of the house or maybe about to step into retirement. Maybe they're in a job that they know that they've got more in them. They're like, man, I know there's more in me than this job. But they don't know how to make the transition. So I coached them through this. And what's interesting is as I was studying this passage, I realized that what Peter did in this is exactly what I coach guys to do in transition. So I want to talk about these 3 things that I help people in transitions, coach them through to make the changes. But it's also something we can learn from the story of Peter. And the first thing I noticed in the story of Peter is this. You've got to bring others in on the journey. You cannot do it alone. The thing God has for you, the next place he wants to take you, the change he wants to help you with, you can't do it alone. There are parts of you that are never going to come out until you do it in relationship, find out about who you are, until you do it in a relationship with others. There's a lot of people who are like, I'm a self-made man. I don't believe in that, right? And for those people who say they're a self-made man, are like, I don't need help from anybody, I always ask them, how's that working out for you? And if you look at their life, you find that their life isn't really going that well because everything God calls us to do is going to be in the context of him working through people in our lives. Now, some of you say, well, I don't like people, right? I get it, but you better start to like them because Jesus came for people. And Jesus loves people, and he says, hey, if you want to get where I want to take you, it's going to take people because you can't do this on your own. And whenever he calls you to take the next step, he's gonna bring people into your path, just like Peter. He sent these 3 guys. He sent Cornelius and said, hey, come talk to Peter and take him somewhere. And in your life, the change that God's calling you to make, he's already put people around you to help you get where you want to go and where he wants you to go. But you've got to embrace those relationships and don't run from them. And when they get uncomfortable, don't walk away from them. The people that God is going to use to help you get where you need to go are already in place. And if they're not there yet, it's because you don't need them yet. But the people that you do need are there to get you where you need to go. And just like the story with Peter, he had to walk with us. He didn't know what he was going towards. But as he walked with these people, it became clear to him. And this is what I've found from most of the people in life. This is the story of my life, and this is most people, successful people I've found. Most of the people that do great things in life, it didn't happen through an epiphany that God said to them, thou shalt go do this. Usually what happened is, and this is what happened in my life. I walked over here and I met this guy in life, and he's like, hey, you should do this. So I started doing this, and then I met somebody else over here, and he's like, hey, you could use that over here, and I started doing this, and then I did this, and then I went and climbed a mountain over here, and somebody's like, and I felt like God said, hey, start taking people on outdoor adventures, and I started doing that, and then I started speaking about it, and now I find myself here today, and it's not because I woke up one morning and God said, you need to be a preacher. Never happened. I never had that epiphany, right? The way it happened was God led me on what seemed to be me stumbling my way down a path, but all the time it was God divinely directing me. And the same is true in your life. You do not realize what God is doing behind the scenes. And just because nothing is happening, it doesn't mean nothing's happening. God is working behind the scenes, and he's using people in your life to get you where you need to go, because there's also parts of you that you don't even realize you have because you're too close to them. I talked about that last week with my wife. She's got some amazing talents. But she doesn't realize that not everybody, she thinks everybody has that. Like, no, not everybody has that. Not everybody has the gift to be able to do that, what you do. But you're so close to the gifts that God has given you that you don't even realize you have them. But you know who does realize you have them? The people around you who see them. So sometimes we need to ask, what do you see about me that I'm not seeing? For good or for bad? And we need to be open to it. Say, what is it that I'm not seeing? Maybe you're constantly hitting walls in relationships. You know the common denominator in all those relationships? You. Ask your friends, hey, is there something I'm not seeing? Am I afraid of commitment? What's going on here? Be honest about it. Be humble. The same thing in some of your giftings. Man, what am I really good at? Because sometimes we don't even see what we're really good at, and we think everybody's good at it. But your friends know what it is, and they're the one that you're the one they come to when they need help in that. You need people around you. You and Jesus may have it all figured out, but it's how you live in relationship to others that proves it. And you need people around you. And Peter getting to where God, thank goodness for us, that Peter followed those guys 30 miles up the coast and met with them. Second thing you've got to do is this. You don't be afraid to get out and explore. You've got to expose yourself to new and uncomfortable experiences. There's actually a study I was reading this week. It's a crazy study, basically saying that there are elements in your genetic code that don't get activated until we try new and uncomfortable things. They say that's why you can meet 2 identical twins and they're completely different, because the experiences they have fired or not fired certain parts of their genetic code. And there's parts of you, this is the simple truth of it, there's parts of you that are dormant right now. You don't even know are in you. There are gifts and talents that are in you, and you're not going to learn that they're in there until you expose yourself to something uncomfortable and new. And you may be really bad at it when you start, but something gets activated. And there's a part of your genetic code, something God's placed in you, a seed of a talent, a gift that he's placed in you that doesn't get activated until you're willing to step out and explore and try some uncomfortable things. And you got to be stretched. Speaking of stretching, when I was 17, we had to do this presidential fitness level at school, in high school, where you had to do this. Any of y'all remember that? This presidential fitness level, you had to do like a certain number of pull-ups and push-ups, and you're like presidential fitness, right? I could never get to presidential fitness level because of one simple problem. I cannot touch my toes. Even when I was 17, my gym teacher was like, touch your toes now and hold it for 10 seconds. Like, man, I can't touch it. And he'd be like, what do you mean everybody can touch their toes? I'm like, I can't. And I remember one time he sat me on the ground. He sat on my back trying to get me to touch my toes. I'm like, I can't do it, right? I could never touch my toes since I was 17. And people would always be like, everybody can touch toes. I'm like, no. And I know some of you can't touch your toes, right? Represent right here if you're out there, right? I have never been able to touch my toes. And so somebody the other day, I was talking to them. I was like, yeah, I don't have that ability. I can't do that. I can't touch my toes. And this girl goes to me, well, you could if you start taking yoga. And I'm like, yoga? Like, I work out, man. I go to the gym and lift weights. Yoga is for wimps, right? She's like, no, yoga would fix your flexibility. You could touch your toes. And I was like, what? So you know what I started doing 2 weeks ago? I started doing yoga every day. And it's horrible. It's incredibly uncomfortable. And the peppy yoga instructors up there's like, oh yeah, breathe through the pain. And you're like, ah, and they're like, vinyasa. And you're like, and I'm stretching, and they're like, oh, isn't this good? Don't you feel the stretching? And I'm like, my God, I'm dying here. But I'm stretching, and I'm stretching. And here's the thing. I still can't touch my toes. I'm a lot closer now. I'm only 2 weeks in. But here's my goal by the end of this year. I'm going to be able to touch my toes by the end of this year, y'all. And you say, well, that's a dumb example. Here's the thing, though. For my whole life, I believed I couldn't do it. But you know how I'm doing it? I'm doing it with the way I'm going to share you in the next point. By this, you always start small. Start small. I'm going to give you a piece of advice that nobody will ever give you in your life. You'll never hear this from any motivational speaker, from any pastor, but I'm going to give it to you. It's the best piece of advice I ever got from me. Here's my advice, you guys. Listen to me. Aim low. You know the mistake most of us make when we know we need to make a change? We look way up here and we compare ourselves to somebody who's like the ultimate in that field, right? And we compare ourselves and we start to try and reach that level, and we're never going to get there. You've got to aim low. And here's what I mean by aim low. Set your sights on where you want to go, but stop looking and comparing yourself to others. And here's the problem we live in, the world we live in. You can compare yourselves to the entire world. And there's always going to be somebody that's better than you if you compare yourself to the entire world. You know, back in the day, we used to have like 100, 200 people in our circle maybe, and you could be good at something, right? Like, well, I'm not good at this, but I'm better than Joe at this, and I'm better than Tina at this, right? So you compare yourself. In fact, there's a study that shows that people who rise to high levels of influence, actually all of them grew up in small towns because they had the experience of being at the top of their game somewhere, and they got the psychological strength of being at the top of their game. But nowadays, man, you can compare yourself to anybody, and you may be the fastest hot dog eater in your town, but there's a guy in Japan that'll blow you away. And you can see him on Facebook. And then you're like, oh, I'm not the fastest hot dog eater anymore, right? And so you give up. So here's the problem most of us do. We aim too high instead of doing this. Figure out, instead of aiming and comparing to others, compare yourself today to the person you were yesterday. And every day, become better little by little by little. Take a step today to make yourself better tomorrow. And then tomorrow, take another little step to make yourself better the next day. And here's the thing. We overestimate what we can pull off in a year when it comes to change, but we underestimate what 5 years, 10 years can be. And when you'll take little steps every day and say, you know what, Lord? I know you have something better for me. And man, I see these people over here that are really good at this, but I don't know if I'll ever get to that point. But you know what? I'm going to be the best me I can be today, and I'm going to improve little by little. So this is what this looks like in your life. Some of you today, you know that you need to go get that GED. And you'd like to go to college, but you don't want to say that out loud because you're like, well, I've never even gotten the GED. Here's what you need to do. You need to get online tonight, and you need to sign up to take those classes. And you need to put everything on hold until you get that GED done. Some of you, you know you need to go to college. You don't know how you're going to pay for it yet, but some of you need to just sign up right now. Sign up for classes. Drop the money. Some of you, you know you're supposed to start your own business. You need to go home, you need to download that Texas LLC paperwork, and you need to file that LLC paperwork, and you need to drop the money, and you do it. You say, I don't know how I'm going to get over there, but I know that there's something I can do today to change my life. And when you start doing that, guys, something gets activated. It's like a step of faith. It says, you know, faith apart from works is dead. Faith isn't sitting around going, I believe God's going to do it. Faith is saying, I'm going to do this because I believe God's going to do it. And you take the step, believing God's going to come through. And here's what happens. I've seen it over and over again. When you're courageous enough to take the step, it's like God all of a sudden looks down and goes, hey, you're serious. Let me breathe in your direction. And I'm going to send you some power that you could never have on your own. And I'm going to take you to a place you could never get on your own because you're not good enough. But I'm all powerful and I can do it all. But he's looking for us to just start small. Just take the step. Maybe your relationship, you know it's not where you need to be with your spouse, and you're saying, I don't know how we could ever get it back. Maybe the first step you need to do is you need to go and apologize today. And I'm sorry, I've totally screwed it up, and I don't even know how to get us back on track, but I've screwed it up. And then the next day, you need to take the step that God tells you to do. Maybe you need to start praying. Maybe you need to start reading some marriage books. Whatever it is, what's the step? There's always something you can do right now, but we minimize that little thing we can do right now thinking that'll never make any difference. But here's the thing. If you start today and you do this one step and you say, I'm going to be better tomorrow than I am today, and you go do that thing tomorrow. You go hit the gym tomorrow and you say, man, I haven't dropped a pound. You go again the next day. 7 days later, you still haven't dropped a pound. You go again. 14 days later, you dropped a pound. You're like, man, nothing's happening. Hey, listen, something's happening. You're getting better every day, and your confidence is building. But most importantly, I believe the forces of heaven are seeing your faith being activated, and God's saying, now I'm going to come help you do what you could never do on your own. I'm going to bring people into your path to help you get where you need to go. And I'm going to get you to the ultimate destiny that I have for you. But it all starts when you start small. Don't despise the day of small beginnings. The Lord rejoices to see you begin. And the goal may be way out here, and you maybe say, there's no way I could ever do that. Stop focusing on that. Aim low. Aim at today. You know the French word, the word journey, that we use, a journey, like we're all on a journey, comes from the French word journée, which means a day. And it comes from the distance you can travel in one day. Journée par journée. Day by day by day. Journey by journey. So stop focusing on way down there. Stop comparing yourself to others and focus on what can I do today, in this day, in this 24-hour period, to make myself better and become more like who Jesus wants me to be. And that's how change is going to happen. And it's going to add up, and it's going to compound. And then one day you're going to wake up and you're going to look back and go, holy cow, how did this happen? I never thought this was possible. People like me don't get to places like this. But it all started because you took one step, and then another, and then another. And then the forces of heaven came behind you. And you did what you got to a place you never could have imagined you could have gotten on your own. 2,000 years after Peter had that experience in Joppa, a guy named Yuri Levine was living in Tel Aviv, right near where Peter was when this dream happened. And he had this idea. He wanted to start an app that could give you in real time how traffic was looking, where police officers were, if there was something in the road, to help traffic go faster, right? Quicker routes to get there. And so he started, he wanted to make this new GPS app. So he contacted Google and he contacted Garmin and he said, hey guys, can I get your maps so I can create a new kind of app? And they're like, no, that's proprietary information. That's our information. You can't have that. So he felt a little helpless, but what he did is he created this app and he asked people to download it. And he said, this app is basically going to send back information about where you drive to my central computers. Can you just turn it on when you're driving around Tel Aviv, around Jaffa here, Tel Aviv, Jaffa, and just let me track it? And so he did that, and his friends would drive around and he'd see, oh, everybody seems to be going this way. That must be a one-way street there. So he put it out and he made a little map out of that. And then he'd see, oh, there's a traffic circle over here. And all of a sudden he started getting all this user feedback from all these people driving around, all these people who had downloaded the app. And he was able to superimpose a grid over the map of Tel Aviv. And he created his own map of Tel Aviv with real-time traffic in Tel Aviv. And then he expanded out to Jerusalem. Then he expanded out to all of Israel. And then he decided to call the app Waze. He sold it to Google for $1 billion. He's doing all right now. But do you know how it started? First of all, he asked for help. He said, guys, I can't do this on my own. Can you send back traffic information about your driving? People are like, we're happy to help. We'd love to help you with that. And all of a sudden, he started slowly building a map. You know what else he did on his days off? He said he would drive around. And if he saw an alley that wasn't on his map, he'd be like, oh, wonder what's down there. He'd drive his car down there and then drive back so it would show up on the map. Then he'd drive over here. And all of a sudden, little by little, as he's exploring, he's finding more and more details about what he's doing. And then finally, the most important thing, he just started small. He started right where he was with what he had. And eventually it turned into a global company worth $1 billion. And we are all grateful for Waze because it saves us a lot of time in traffic. But it started when he started small. And here's the thing, guys. The exact same principles are true in your life if you'll step into them. They work for everybody. And it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what people have said over you. It doesn't matter the mental blocks you've got. If you'll get past them and say, you know what, with God, all things are possible anyway. With God, all things are possible. All he's calling me to do is right where I'm at, take the step that's in front of me. Embrace the relationships he's put around me to help me get where I want to go. Be brave enough to explore and be uncomfortable. And most importantly, start small with what you have right now. I'm a testament to this in my life, guys. Over and over, I've seen this. This isn't some theory, all right? A man with experience is never at the mercy of a man with a theory.
Thank you for listening to Crossroads Church. We trust this message enriched your life in some way. For more information, visit us on the web at www.crossroadsc.com Or if you're in the area, come by and visit us on a Sunday morning at 8:30, 10, or 11:30 a.m. Crossroads Church, we're bringing a real God to real people.